Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Process of a Pro series. In today's episode number 5, I'm going to be covering the rotation and positioning aspect of the endgame. I'm going to be going through each zone of the endgame in depth and explaining to you exactly how and when to rotate, along with where and when to position and when to look for kills. Be sure to use code Sonata YT in the Fortnite item shop if you guys do want to support me. Let's hop right into this video. So to begin, I'm going to be starting off with the first zone that I would consider the endgame, which is going to be Zone 4. Now, Zone 4 is oftentimes known as the zone right before half and half zone. This is where you're going to need to position on the edge of this storm circle in order to maximize your chances of getting half and half. The reason for this is because if you position in the middle, there's a chance that you're going to be close to half and half, but you're never going to 100% be in it. If you position on the edge, you're taking that little gamble where if the zone does pull on you, you're going to be in a great position. And if it doesn't, you're going to be in a bad position. However, it's a really good idea to take that chance and try to get that good position. That's why I recommend you position on the edge. And overall, it's a great tip. I would also recommend that in Zone 4, you try not to push anybody for any kills. And you try to position on the dead sides of the zone in order to be more protected. If you have a choice on which side of the zone to position on, I'd recommend you position on the edge of the zone that has the least amount of people. This is where you should be getting any remaining surge that you may need, but please do not be W-keying anybody. Try your best to conserve materials. Try not to peek too hard in order to avoid getting lobby sprayed. That's a really bad situation in this zone that happens quite a bit. But also remember that your high ground is key when you are positioning. If you have the opportunity to, I'd recommend you position up on hills, up on elevated surfaces. That's going to help you out a lot in the long run. Now, once Zone 4 closes, you're going to be moving into what's called the half and half zone. Now, the half zone is the most important one in my opinion for the endgame. This kind of acts as a gateway from the later mid-game into the endgame. This is the first half in, half out zone. And if you don't get that zone on the gamble that you took in the previous zone, then you should always try to rotate as fast and as early as possible. Try to avoid W keying when looking for elevated positions if you can. Because if you do try to W key, especially while you're rotating, there's a high chance of you getting lobby sprayed and focused. I'd recommend that when you are rotating in this zone, you need to focus more on getting to a safe spot rather than focusing on kills. Examples of where to position: maybe you're on top of someone else's base but you're protecting yourself. Maybe you try to position yourself up on some natural cover like a house or a hill. Maybe you even try to get up onto the high ground layer and control it for the rest of the game. All that matters is that you have a high ground position and some good sight lines to look for maybe a little bit of kills if people are rotating late. However, it's important to focus on only getting kills after you rotate. And once the half zone is fully closed, the zone that's going to pop up immediately is going to be the first moving zone, or Zone 6. Now, before this zone starts, you should be scouting. And if you guys don't know what scouting is, basically it's where you look through either a cone peak or a window or some variety of opening onto the terrain around you and find out where 3 primary things are. This is going to be dead sight, high ground, and the terrain that's going to be in front of you as the storm moves. As an IGL or any player in general, you should be definitely scouting for those 3 things. The reason you scout for dead sight is because that's the side of zone that you want to be on during the endgame. The reason you scout for height is just to have an idea of who can spray down upon you, or if you can retake height in the later of the game. And then the last thing, terrain. The reason you scout for terrain is to know what you're up against while rotating. As a person who's rotating during the endgames, your only 2 enemies are the storm and the terrain in front of you, much less the players around you. You need to be focusing on actually getting ahead of the zone and then focusing on players around you. Now, you can rotate using any of your movement abilities. Stuff like sprinting, mantling, sliding. Any of these attributes are extremely useful in the modern day. Or you can end up using stuff like natural rotation, such as the new Indiana Jones weapon, or a rift if you have one near you. However, since those things are rare, I would recommend you rely on primarily your movement abilities and your tarping techniques. Now, tarping is really important, and this is something that I really want to focus in on, because when people tarp, oftentimes they end up using way too many mats, especially during the first moving zone. And this is the zone where you need to conserve your mats to the best of your ability. If you're playing solos, try to do small tarps like stair, floor, stair, floor. But if you're playing duos, try to do very basic tarps and try to connect to other people's areas and just replace their walls rather than building full new tunnels. Also, make sure to not place any walls in front of you and don't cover areas where enemies won't spray you from. So if you're on the edge of zone and you're facing a side of storm, then you don't really need to cover that side because it's not like anybody's going to be fully diving out of storm to come and fight you. Just focus on saving your materials for the next zone. Which leads me into my next point, which is zone number 7, which is known as the second moving zone. Now, in this storm circle, there are 2 routes I would recommend that you try to take. This is where you can start being a little bit more risky. and either you can stay back and rotate late while looking for kills as you stay back, or you can rotate early and then look back for kills later. Both of these methods are very applicable. However, what is important is that you're able to read the lobby beforehand and understand which one would be better. I'd recommend that if there's less than 15 players in your game at zone 7, you can try to stay back and then look ahead for kills because there's going to be less players ahead of you trying to build and block you. However, if you're in a game with more than 15 players at zone 7, I definitely recommend you try to get ahead early and then look back for kills and focus on getting rid of those stragglers and becoming one of the better players in the lobby. Most people during the zone are going to be starting to run low on mats and meds, so your chances of getting kills off of the weaker players in this lobby is very high. That's why I recommend you use either of those two strategies. Once again, focusing in on scouting before the zone starts moving. A really good player will be able to get to the 6th zone early and then focus on scouting for the 7th zone early as well. That's what a really good player would do, and I would recommend you guys do it as well. But obviously at the end of zone 7, you guys definitely do need to scout the area for zone number 8. Which leads me into my next point, which is zone number 8. This is going to be the third moving zone, the second to last zone of the game. This is ideally where there'll be very few players left in the lobby. You should try to get your own layer of zone with maximum 1 or 2 people or teams on your layer. This is the time where you should try to get a refresh if you haven't already, because most of the time you're going to be running very low on mats. For rotation, you should focus on getting ahead and staying separate from the rest of the other players in the lobby. Try to get any remaining kills on the lower tier players in the lobby, people who are low on mats, meds, low ground. Ideally, you should be looking down to try to get impact frags, but I did cover that in my last endgame video. But zone 8 is pretty much the setup for the final zone of the match, which is where you're going to be closing out and trying to win the game. Now for zone 9, this is going to be the final zone of the game. This is where you should be finishing off any remaining players in the match. Or if you know that you can't win the game due to your loot situation or positioning situation, you should be looking for the final couple kills and points of the game. Ideally, you should be using old builds and natural objects as cover for when you rotate around, because most of the time you're going to have very low mats, you need to focus on staying alive. But I'd recommend you also try to get to the high ground if possible. If you're able to get to the high ground, then you're probably going to end up winning the game, and then just finish off any of the other players around you. But what's really important across all of these general zones is that you focus on doing 3 primary things. Start off the zone by scouting, then rotating early, then getting to a safe spot, and then looking back for kills. That's the ideal 4-step plan I'd recommend for all the zones of the endgame. Obviously, it can vary depending on your loot, your mats, your kills. Stuff like that will obviously vary how you play, but simply put, those are the 4 steps of every endgame that I'd recommend to all players. Anyways guys, that is the process of a pro video number 5. If you guys did enjoy this video, please consider dropping a like and subscribing to the channel down below. I'm really excited to bring this series back. I have been putting a lot of effort into creating the scripts and all of the ideas for this video. I've been talking to a bunch of my friends who are semi and professional players. They help me out a lot with planning on how to exactly to explain this stuff to you guys, and it really helps me out, and I hope it helps you guys out too. But that's about it for this video guys. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye guys.